Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Tuesday, December 11th. That's the group War. Of course, one of the most underrated groups of all time. Well, it's a very light, hard news day. It's good to have those kinds of days from time to time. Reading this morning's papers, though, I did not for the life of me understand the optimism on the fiscal cliff debate, but nonetheless, stocks finished up today. The Dow was up 79 points to 13,248. The S&P 500 was up 0.7%. The Dow was up 0.6%. NASDAQ was up 35 points, over 1% to 3,022. Gold is at 17.11, oil 85.88, and the 10-year Treasury at 1.65%. London's FTSE market was unchanged, and Frankfurt's DAX was up 0.8%. Tomorrow, the Federal Reserve met today. It's concluding its meetings tomorrow, and Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke will have a press conference, and I'm sure he will be spelling out more quantitative easing. The question is, will they announce a renewed buying program of Treasury specifically? So on the fiscal cliff, House Speaker John Boehner around noon asked, where are Obama's spending cuts? Where is Obama's balanced approach? Where's the down payment? Earlier, Republican Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee basically said, yeah, we may get a stopgap down payment, but it won't be anything he'll likely support because it'll be light on spending cuts and or entitlement reform. This afternoon, Majority Leader Senator Harry Reid said a deal will be hard to reach by Christmas, and that Democrats aren't going to put detailed spending cuts on the table. So as I've been saying in these first videos and all fall in my week in review columns, whatever bridge or stopgap deal Congress and the White House agree on will be woefully short, with little hope for a better deal or real reform down the road, and the market will crash. That's a fact. Book it. Coincidentally, a recent Associated Press GFK poll found that 74% of Americans disapprove of the way Congress is handling its job. Just 23% approve. Virtually unchanged from June and slightly above Congress' recent low point of 12% approval during the debt ceiling debate in August 2011. And oh yeah, by the way, I didn't even talk about the debt ceiling, and that is another debate that we will be having after the first of the year. A real freaking mess. In Germany, a reading on investor confidence climbed unexpectedly, but as Derek Coleman, that great basketball player, used to say, whoop-de-damn-do. I could not believe how midday that some were saying our stock market was rallying because German investor confidence index rose. No. In Italy, it seems pretty clear that Prime Minister Mario Monti will announce next week he is running in February's snap election, and thus against Silvio Berlusconi. Berlusconi has zero chance of winning, but he could pick up a sizable block of seats in the next parliament. Or perhaps an increase over what he already has, I should say. In Egypt, President Morsi is trying to clarify his martial law order. In attempting to reassure citizens, it was handed down for the express purpose of protecting polling places on Saturday, but the opposition says the military can take civilians to military courts though as of now the military is holding off on doing so. There's confusion among the opposition whether it will boycott the vote or go and vote no to the draft constitution drawn up by the Islamists. Mohammed al-Baradi, one of the leaders of the opposition, said Morsi should delay the referendum for a few months because the draft doesn't adequately protect women, freedom of expression, or religion. Tuesday it was announced 90% of judges refused to oversee the referendum. And this is important because judges are supposed to oversee the vote at each polling station by Egyptian law. In Japan, former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and his opposition Liberal Democratic Party, LDP, and a smaller ally are on track for a big victory in Sunday's national elections. According to polls today, winning more than 300 seats in the 480-member lower house. Abe, who's 58, resigned abruptly as Prime Minister in 2007 after a troubled year in office. He has vowed to press the Bank of Japan for radical monetary easing and spend more on public works to beat persistent deflation and a strong yen. And he's also pledged to take a bolder stance on security policy. Current Prime Minister Noda and his Democratic Party of Japan may get fewer than 80 of the 480 seats, which would be quite a humiliating defeat. Recall yesterday I said that in Japan they are formally in recession after reporting that GDP fell in the third quarter and GDP in the second quarter was revised down. So that does not help Prime Minister Noda. The National Intelligence Council, which is out of the Director of National Intelligence Office, in its first assessment in 4 years aimed at shaping U.S. strategic thinking, said that China will surpass the United States as the largest economy in the 2020s, in line with independent forecasters. But the study said the United States, while weaker, will probably remain the top player in 2 decades thanks to its role in resolving global crises, its technological prowess, and its soft power that attracts outsiders. The report said the U.S. most likely will remain first among equals among the other great powers in 2030 because of its preeminence across a range of power dimensions and legacies of its leadership role. Nevertheless, with the rapid rise of other countries, the unipolar moment is over in Pax Americana. The era of American ascendancy in international politics that began in 1945 is fast winding down. The study predicted that Asia's economy, military spending, and technological investment would surpass those of North America and Europe combined by 2030, but warned of major uncertainty over an emerging China. If Beijing fails to transition to a more sustainable, innovation-based economic model, it will remain a top-tier player in Asia, but the influence surrounding what has been a remarkable ascendance will dissipate, so said the report out of the National Intelligence Council. Among the megatrends that I noticed in the report, quote, demand for resources will increase owing to an increase in global population from 7.1 billion today to about 8 billion by 2030. Demand for food set to rise 35%, energy 50% over the next 15-20 years. Nearly half of the world population will live in areas with severe water stress. Fragile states most at risk, but China and India are vulnerable to volatility of key resources. Main questions will be whether there will be more effective management, wider technology use, and greater governance mechanisms. Direct investments by Chinese companies in the U.S. are likely to reach $6.5 billion this year, which would break the previous record of $5.2 billion in 2010. That's according to Rhodium Group, which tracks Chinese investment. This does not include a $4.2 billion deal for one of the world's largest aircraft leasing firms, which would close next spring. That's ILFC out of Los Angeles, or the International Lease Finance Corporation. That deal is just announced, but again won't close until next spring, so not included in those numbers. Mexico's new president, Enrique Peña Nieto, is pushing for constitutional reform to open up Mexico's state-run energy sector. Wants to open up to private investment. Nieto told the Financial Times he would not privatize Pemex, the state oil company, but he said he was determined to use private investment in Mexico's highly protected energy sector to boost wider development. Pemex is one of the world's 10 biggest oil producers, with a monopoly over the country's substantial deep water resources, but it has struggled to increase output in the past 8 years due to a lack of investment in foreign technology. HSBC, Europe's largest bank, agreed to pay the U.S. $1.9 billion to settle U.S. probes of money laundering in the largest such accord ever, $1.92 billion to be exact. The settlement includes a deferred prosecution agreement with the U.S. Department of Justice. In a deferred prosecution agreement, the government allows a target to avoid charges by meeting certain conditions, including the payment of fines or penalties, and by committing to specific reforms, either under the guidance of a monitor or the creation of an internal compliance panel. Now, these incredibly significant penalties evolved from allegations HSBC laundered funds of sanctioned nations such as Iran and Sudan, and thus was in essence supporting terrorism, as well as drug cartels in Mexico. Discount stores fell the most among 500 stocks in the S&P today. Dollar General, the largest dollar store chain, said it will respond to rivals' price cuts in the fourth quarter. I thought everything was just $1. But I went to Dollar Tree today. Look at this, boys and girls. Zachary Thin Mints, $1. A full box, $1. And I always go to Dollar Tree for my horseradish needs. I put horseradish sauce on everything. 1905 horseradish sauce, $1. Bought all kinds of cleaning supplies. I love Dollar Tree, but Dollar General shares dropped $3.50 today, and Dollar Tree $1.30. Steve G, sorry about that. Steve G being a big holder of Dollar Tree stock. Delta Airlines agreed to buy Singapore Airlines' 49% stake in Virgin Atlantic for $360 million. Virgin Group and Sir Richard Branson retain a 51% share holding. Virgin and Delta said the deal would allow them to overcome slot constraints and offer more flights out of key airport Heathrow. The carriers, Virgin and Delta, will operate 31 peak day round trips from the UK and North America. Singapore Airlines is selling its stake because of increased competition in its local market. Singapore has itself launched a low-cost carrier and has been putting money into its regional service. Silk Air. Republican lawmakers in Michigan passed right-to-work legislation today, thus banning the requirement that workers pay union dues as a condition of employment. So that's limiting labor union powers, to say the least. The bills will be signed into law by Michigan Governor Rick Snyder later this week. Proponents say the measure will bring more jobs and economic benefits to Michigan, while opponents say it is designed to weaken unions and will lead to lower wages. Students in Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and Finland, among other nations, bested U.S. 4th and 8th grade students in the 2011 Trends in International Mathematics and Sciences study. This is from a report by Stephanie Bonchero of the Wall Street Journal. U.S. students still outperformed the international averages and were among the top performers compared with 60 countries and educational systems that administered the 4th grade math and science test and the 59 systems that gave the 8th grade exams. Some states volunteered to have their results broken out separately, and Massachusetts, for example, posted the second highest scores globally on the 8th grade science test. But in 4th grade math, 43% of students in Singapore scored advanced compared with 13% of their U.S. counterparts. In 8th grade math, 47% of Korean students scored at the top level versus 7% of U.S. students. In science, 33% of Singapore's 4th graders and 40% of its 8th graders scored at a top level, compared with 15% and 10% for the U.S. group. Researchers from the environmental group Oceana tested the DNA of 142 fish bought from 81 retail outlets in New York City. This is always one of my favorite topics. 39% were mislabeled. It's unacceptable that New York seafood lovers are being duped more than 1/3 of the time when purchasing certain types of fish, said Kimberly Warner, an Oceana scientist. All 16 sushi eateries subjected to testing sold customers mislabeled fish. Actually, New York is better than some other cities. In Boston, 48% of the fish was mislabeled, 55% in Los Angeles. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, an article in December's Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research studied 1,344 college football linemen over 7 decades and concluded that the average 2010 lineman was 50% heavier than his 1950 counterpart. Of course, we all know this, but it is interesting. During that span, the average offensive and defensive lineman grew up to just more than 290 pounds from just above 190 pounds, 1950 to 2010. 6 have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, including Rush, Randy Newman, Public Enemy, Donna Summer, Hart, and Albert King. Just a absolutely pathetic class. I love the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the museum in Cleveland, but the hall itself and the voting the last few years has been atrocious. Finally, I just want to note the passing, the death of Nicholas Checky, a Navy SEAL from Norwin High School in North Huntingdon, Pennsylvania. I bring it up because I'm very familiar with the area that he grew up in. It's near Greensburg and Monroeville, Pennsylvania, where I have lots of relatives. Petty Officer First Class Checky died during the combat mission to rescue a kidnapped American doctor from the Taliban the other day. He apparently was a member of SEAL Team 6, the elite squad that killed Osama bin Laden. I have not seen whether Checky had been part of that mission, so we pray for his family. I'll be back with you tomorrow, Wednesday. For more stuff, go to stocksnews.com. I'm Brian Trumbore. Take care.